G'day everyone and welcome to the GameDay Squad Aussie Rules Fantasy Show. I'm Pitty, that's Haz, and we are the Fantasy Bros. We've partnered with GameDay Squad this season to bring you everything you need to know to succeed in GDS Aussie Rules. Now that's right, Haz, he's joining us for the first time in a while and to preview this live show for round 4. Haz, a couple of weeks running around in the twos, mate. How are you going?
First of all, thanks for having me back, mate. It's good to be back. It has been a while. I think it was the opening round live preview show was probably my last one. So, yes, I'm looking forward to tonight to get into it and to preview all things round 4. And secondly, let's hope I'm not running around in the twos. Been training in the ones and hopefully it stays that way. But other than that, I'm good, mate. Squads are tracking pretty well. But what about yourself?
Yeah, going well as well, mate. I'm looking forward to having you back on. I've missed you there those couple of weeks. We've had some good guests coming along and sharing their insights, but I have missed chatting some footy with you. So I can't wait to get stuck into a big round coming up for round 4. And for all our viewers and listeners as well, just make sure that you've subscribed to all our Fantasy Bros socials so that you don't miss a thing this season. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, TikTok, Facebook and Insta as well. Just make sure that you search at Fantasy Bros AU. And if you're a new coach, it's not too late to get started in GameDay Squad. Just simply download the app or visit GameDay Squad website, create an account and use that promo code on screen that you can see, FBAR26. And if you do so, you'll be rewarded with 3 9-player common packs to get you started. And again, as always, each week before we get stuck into a big round coming up, round 4, we do want to go back around the grounds and have a look and see how we went in round 3. And Haz, mate, coming back on, how did you go this round? And more importantly, are you still in the cup?
Round 3 was a bit of an interesting one for me. I think we had some pretty good picks that we, discussed, or you discussed on my behalf last episode last week, but I didn't actually play majority of those picks, and I was a bit filthy at myself, and I think you were too a little bit as well, and just pretty much had an average round across the board other than that 6th place FantasyBros Sunday Showdown finish there. But other than that, yes, I am lucky enough to still be in the cup. I did win my matchup against non-applicable. And yeah, as I mentioned, that pretty average performance. My best standard comp finish was 19th in Classic, which I was actually a little bit surprised about. I thought it probably might have been a little bit worse. I missed a couple of the big ones. I didn't play Rochelle or Josh Tracy, which I'm sure you're about to talk about. But what about yourself? Did you manage to overcome that round 2 blues that you normally have in the cup and achieve a new personal best result?
Yes, I know. Round 2, it's just been my undoing in cups so far. I've never been able to get past it in our short time playing GameDay Squad, but I did, thankfully, for the first time. I broke that hoodoo, and who knows what we can do here. We're going to treat it like the Lions. We're just going to take each week like a new hoodoo and see how far we can go. So I got up against Ben a long time, and it was a pretty solid victory, actually. It was a pretty close battle, but got there, which was good, and up against Bomber Blitz this week. So that will be interesting to see how we go. Hopefully we can just keep going. That would be awesome. And in terms of my general week, it was, not bad. Like I had a pretty, it was an okay week in Classic, so 14th there. And then not too bad elsewhere. I had 3 top 20 finishes all up, which was all right. But mate, I don't reckon I could have ruined my salary any more than I did. Like if I had have tried, I had silvers of Gawn, Whitfield, Baz Smith. Like I didn't quite capitalize on those performances. I did have a couple which helped me, obviously, like a Platt Shees, which was nice, and but I just really mucked it up. And we'll get into those stars and scars in a sec. And in fact, we might even jump into that now. Do we want to jump into our stars and scars? Do you want to kick us off there, mate?
Yeah, let's do it. So, like you mentioned, missing some salary. I only played a bronze Cozzy in Classic, and I do own his All-Star.
Another one.
That All-Star was in my Challenger side, which was lovely there. But obviously, missing that salary on him in Classic, which probably hurt my finish a little bit. But geez, he was unreal on Sunday afternoon against the Blues. I put in the Discord with your spicy Sunday shout about Cozzy being going back to 3 goals and 110 plus performance. And I was wrong about the goal aspect, and I said he'd be best of field, and he was certainly best of field for 161 points on Sunday afternoon. He was just absolutely everywhere and lit up the MCG. But obviously my scar is Jezza Cameron. And now before the show, mate, you said that we shouldn't talk about Jezza Cameron because it at the end, it probably shouldn't be my scar. I think it should be a collective scar for both of us. We decided that Thursday night, just before the Cats game, that we didn't want to play a key forward in what was going to be, and this is going to lead into your start of Cyclone Narelle over in WA, but we decided we didn't want to play a key forward in Josh Tracy, who was someone we were hot on all week, and we decided to play another key forward in the wet down in Geelong. So that one definitely backfired. I think Tracy doubled Jez's score, and Jezza actually counted for me, which was a little bit disappointing in the end of things. So, yeah, that's my stars and scars for round 3, mate. What about yourself?
Oh, yeah, it's rough when you put it like that, isn't it? I did ask you not to put that in there, and of course you did. And before I talk through my stars and scars, pop yours in the comments. Let us know who starred for your squad and who absolutely scarred your round. But yeah, let's start off on the positive there. To go along with your Cozzy Pickett, Maxi Gawn, what a pick he was. You really had to play him last week, and if you didn't, you were left behind because no other ruck went well. We saw a 66 from Darcy Cameron. We saw Cherry struggle as well. We saw Jackson with, I think it was an 88 from memory. So yeah, just those other rucks that we thought there were some good matchups for. There were other factors at play, of course, but it was Gawn who really held that solid score with 151. So he was a huge star, and particularly that fourth quarter with Cozzy as well. But yeah, don't worry about Jezza, mate. That was just that was the stupidest decision I have ever made, probably in my whole fantasy career. We were in shambles. I was rattled on Thursday night, and we went through the data and we went. I looked at the radar down in Geelong, and I'm like, oh, it's clearing up. He's kicked a few goals on them in the last couple of times they've played, and he does look quite good. And he was in, he was out, he was in, he was out, and I went, let's just go for it, and it absolutely backfired. Yeah. But I'm blaming Cyclone Narelle for that. I'm not blaming myself. That's not my fault. That Cyclone coming through was the scar for my week, because if I had left Josh Tracy in there, that 14, that was going to be looking very, very different. But anyhow, we live and we don't learn. There's a few comments in the chat there as well. Yeah, Star Sarong. Well done, Janeth, for picking the correct docker there that week. And g'day, mate. Thanks for tuning in as well. TCB, yeah, Tristan Cherry, the big scar there. And unfortunately, in terms of Tristan Cherry, we know that he'll be missing a little bit of time on the sidelines, which we'll talk about later on. And your mate there in the chat as well has Daniel Schloss as well. Yeah, just mentioning that, yeah, Tristan Cherry, huge disappointment. And yeah, surely he's the biggest scar for a lot of people. Definitely, I would think so. Lots of those scores getting around, hey?
Yeah, there's another one on screen at the moment there with Janeth, obviously scar as well, which was Zach Merritt. And I think he did bring it up. He flagged it last week during the show, and he was concerned about Foss going to Merritt. And we were kind of like, oh, well, Merritt's, experienced veteran, and he's just going to run through that tag. And boy, oh boy, geez, we were wrong. So yeah, apologies there, Janeth. And he was definitely a scar for us as well, because he was in all of our sides. And thankfully, he kicked that goal late to save his score just a little bit.
Yeah, he was highly played too, so we can sort of hide behind that a little bit. So I think a lot of people went down the same road, and I just didn't think that, I thought he'd still get to a respectable score, but clearly that's not the case. So let's put that week behind us. I can't look at Jezza on screen any longer there, mate. So let's move on to round 4. And we have 2 teams on a bye, only 2 this week, but even with 2 fewer teams on the bye this week compared to the 4 last week, we've seen our backlines become decimated, and we've actually got to pick a backline this week. The Saints and Giants, they're both on the bye. So we'll be not picking Sinclair, Naz, Whitfield, Ash in our backlines. We've obviously got Callahan as an option in our midfield, who had a good week last week too. So do you want to talk us through the games there, mate, and what we're looking at, and obviously which ones fall under the those special competitions?
Mate, before I talk about the games, geez, those 4 players not in our backlines, and something just does not feel right this round. I don't think they've left my backline since I started playing GES. So this is a week of many firsts, and a lot of people that are taking the field for the very first time. So hopefully they don't disappoint, because, yeah, it does not look right. That is for sure. But anyway, we move on. So round 4's fixtures are as follows. So we can see that we've got the Lions and the Pies in the Easter Thursday game at the Gabba tomorrow night. And then we got our double header on Friday. So Friday afternoon, a reminder, this one starts at about 3:15 Australian Eastern Standard Time. So it's the Kangas versus the Blues. And then Saturday night, we have the Crows versus the Dockers. So that's all in our Stats Lab primetime fixtures there. And then on Saturday, we have the Tigers versus Port and West Coast, who surprisingly are inside the top 6, I believe, at the moment, with 2 wins after 3 games playing against Sydney. So that should be an absolute cracker the way West Coast are playing. And then Sunday showdown fixtures, we have the 3 games, which obviously includes the Monday clash between the Hawks and Geelong. We also have the D's and Suns and Bulldogs and Dons on Sunday.
Nice. And just on those teams for particularly for Thursday night as well, the Lions and the Pies in that Easter Thursday blockbuster there at the Gabba. We've got those team lists in too. So for the Lions, Darcy Gardner, he's out injured, as is Noah Answorth, and in comes Dara Joyce and James Tunstall. And for Collingwood, probably more importantly in terms of picking our primetime competitions, Scott Pendlebury is out this week with that Achilles problem. So he will not be someone you can pick in your primetime comp. And Darcy Moore is also out injured, and in come Lockie Sullivan and Will Hayes as well. So there are a couple of those changes for that Thursday night game. And we'll be showing our consensus primetime team later on as well after our contender sides, thanks to the Stats Lab, who are getting behind us for season 2026. So, mate, I think there's a comment in the chat there from Daniel Schloss about the Defenders being a tough gig this week to pick. Well, we have you covered, and I reckon we jump straight into it. What do you reckon, Haz?
Yeah, let's do it, mate. You can start us off. Who are you keen on this week?
Yeah, well, looking at that list there on screen, we can see our plug and plays for the week. So we don't have access to Sinclair, Ash, Witt, or Wang, but we still have Dane Zorko and Josh Dacos. So I think they have to be sort of locked into our squads, especially because Collingwood, in terms of the data, they're actually pretty positive matchup. So I think Zorks and Dacos go straight into our squad, and it might just be a question of how much salary are you putting on them. In terms of 3 other options we could be looking at, we have picked out Jaden Short, Jordan Clark, and John Noble as our 3 possible options for round 4. And I might kick off with Jaden Short, mate, because we talked about him last week, Hoss and I, as an option, and he was sort of had a slightly down week in terms of his scoring, but I think his role is still looking really, really good. So he's hit scores of 112, 159, and 140 in his 3 games to start this year, and he's looking really damaging as that key ball distributor out of their backline. And in terms of Port Adelaide, they're actually not an amazing matchup for defenders in terms of who we're looking to target. They're actually the worst matchup, only allowing 66.7 GDS points this year. And no Eagles defender last week, if we're looking at like who sort of scored well against the Power recently. No Eagles defender went over 100 last week against the Power. So 97 was the highest for Tom McCarthy. My question is that a West Coast factor, though? How much can we sort of read into that little stat there? If we go back a week before as well, Archie Roberts and Zach Johnson both had 107 points against them the week prior, which is a little bit more promising. And then Luke Parker had 116 on them the week before that. So although they are a hard matchup, they're not one we need to really avoid, especially when we've got so many players on the bye this week and Jaden Short in the form that he's in, especially when he's got that high kick to handball ratio. So I think he's one we probably should be looking at. In terms of his previous scoring against Port as well, he's hit scores of 106, 101 and 96 in his last 3 against the Power. But Port, they're a bit of a different team now in terms of the makeup of their side. They are a little bit younger, and there's some change happening over there in Adelaide. And yeah, Short, he's back to that incredible form from probably 2024 and before. So I think that this week he's shaping as an option that we should be probably chucking into our backlines. And he's just looking absolutely elite, mate. Have you got him in your side at the moment, or are you keen on a Jaden Short?
Oh, definitely, 100%. I think Short, outside of Zorko and Dacos, is probably one of the very first that was in my sides this week. And it's just basically what you said is he's looking back to his 2024 self. He's taking those kick-ins, like he said. The Tigers are looking to get the ball in his hands. He's got a high kick, high mark game, which is obviously showing in those elite ceiling scores from the first 2 rounds of the season. So, they're playing on the MCG. It's not like the game is over at Adelaide Oval where it's probably smaller. Obviously, the MCG is plenty of space for him to find those little cheap 45 kicks and get those, plus 7s that we all love. So I think he's definitely a play. And obviously, once again, if it's a dry day as well, I think his ceiling, he's probably got the biggest ceiling of all the defenders this week, just based on that high kick and high mark game that we spoke about. So, I think he's definitely a play this week.
Yeah, takes equal most kick-ins as well last week and for his side. So I think he's a pretty safe pick for us. couple of comments in the chat we'll get to soon, mate, but we might just knock out Jordan Clark here really quickly as another option. Got off to a bit of a slow start this year, 89 against the Cats, but he's hit scores of 109 and 114 in his last two. That was against the Demons and Tigers, respectively. And the Crows are a neutral matchup as well for opposition defenders. They're ranked 10th in terms of their matchup strength or matchup difficulty, I should say. So they're allowing about 77.6 GDS points on average to opposition defenders. And if we actually go back to when, look at defenders who have scored against those Crows, Tom Stewart had 136 GDS points against the Crows, albeit he plays a slightly different brand of footy to a Jordan Clark, but he is similar in the fact that he's looking like that key distributor too, which Jordan Clark is. So Houston and Dacos, they also had big scores against the Crows in round one. They went 141 and 118. So again, defenders can score against the Crows, and Clark is clearly that number one defender in terms of that ball use out of that back line. And I think that, again, a bit like Jaden Short with that reduced player pool in the back line to choose from this week, he's one we probably should be looking at. And going back against the last couple of times he's played the Crows, he's put up scores of 118 and 113. So I think with him, I'm not sure what his ceiling is going to be like. I'm not sure if he's got the ceiling this year that we can expect a big 140, 150, 160 like we might have seen previously, or like we might potentially expect from a Luke Ryan in a really juicy matchup if they can get some time to, wax that footy around, but it's just unlikely at the moment the way they're playing. But I think Clark is safe, and I think he's consistent, and I think he's going to give you that decent score you're needing in the back line. And he's a pretty popular player amongst GDS coaches, mate, with, if we look at the data there on StatLab in terms of those percentage selections amongst squads, he's the sixth most selected defender this week. So he is in the top 7 defenders in terms of popularity. So I think with that safety and with that, understanding that a lot of coaches are probably going to go there this week, I think he's shaping as another good pick.
Yeah, and I think you nailed it on the head with the comment there about it's probably someone that doesn't have that ceiling score, but I think you're playing him just for the consistency alone. He's probably he might just sneak over the 100 points, but he doesn't really go under that a whole lot. So I'm playing him this week just purely, for the fact that our backlines are decimated. And he's not normally someone that I do look to play because he doesn't have that ceiling. But I think this week, in a week where, we are missing the big guns, maybe something like a safety net is the way to go, just with the other options that we are looking at. So, no, I don't mind a Jordan Clark this week, especially against Adelaide, like you mentioned. Houston and Dacos have shown they can score well against them, and we know Clark can, rack up on his day. So definitely playing him this week.
Yeah. Now, I've got a question for you there in the chat, mate. Arnie Booger. G'day, Arnie Booger. Thanks for joining in and giving us a comment there in the chat. They say Newland instead of Noble. What do we think? We've got Noble there as an option that we can look at this week, and this was always going to be a point of discussion for us. And again, Daniel Schloss is in the chat there as well, saying pod Joel Jeffrey. I think it's really Joel Jeffrey, Bodie Newland, and John Noble. Where do you sit with these Suns defenders? Because we saw last time the Suns played, it was John Noble that actually didn't score as well. And we saw Bodie Newland take 16 marks and put up a monster score. And Joel Jeffrey has put up some really solid scores to start the year as well. So are you looking at any of the Suns defenders? Are you more keen on Noble, or have you thought about the other two?
Now, this is a really tricky one. For me, I would always, gravitate straight to John Noble just as that ball-using halfback who, is reliable with kick-ins and he just racks up disposals. But obviously, like you mentioned, Bodie Newland had that massive ceiling game against, we have to say it is against Richmond, though, last week. And the 16 marks is obviously, it was 10 more marks than he's had in any other game this season. So that's probably just the Richmond factor and the fact they allow a lot of kicks, a lot of marks, and the Suns had a lot of uncontested possessions. If we look at his scores outside of that, he scored 71 in opening round against the Cats. And normally he does play as a bit of a key defender, bit of a lockdown. So I don't love targeting a bit of a key defender. I know, yes, once again, he has shown that he's got a ceiling, but I think if we're talking consistency, I think I'm leaning towards Noble and even Joel Jeffrey as a bit of a pod. Jeffrey has been really good so far this year, and it doesn't seem that Noble has dominated the ball back down there. But I don't know. For me, I always lean towards Johnny Noble, and that's probably more because he's dominated. He's shown that he can dominate so far this season. He scored that 136 GDS points against the Cats in opening round, but obviously his last two have been quite underwhelming for coaches, where he scored 101 and 81. But the Demons are currently the 5th best matchup for opposition defenders and the 4th best matchup you can be targeting this week because the Saints are on the bye, and they allow 85.1 GDS points on average to opposition defenders. And the Dockers defenders scored 129 and 109 against them last week, and that was Luke Ryan and Jordan Clark. And with the Cats boys going large on them in round 1 as well, Max Holmes played a little bit behind the ball and scored 149. Tommy Stewart scored 130 and Humphrey scored 103. So they have proven scores against them so far this year. And obviously the matchup data does say that as well. So, Melbourne are Noble's 5th favourite matchup across the course of his career, and he's hit scores of 126 and 142 in his last 2 against them, and they were both last year. So he's got the recent matchup form, whereas I'm not sure, Joel Jeffrey and Bodie Hewlin have. And once again, obviously, it's probably something that with the backlines the way they are this week, you could maybe play 2 of them if you are keen on a Jeffrey as a bit of a pod. But to me, it's Noble, and I'm probably only looking to play the others in the Fantasy Bros Sunday Showdown.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I was just looking at the kick-in breakdown as well recently. Interestingly enough, though, Bodie Hewlin's taken the most kick-ins each week, and he's leading the kick-in count so far at the moment with 11. John Noble takes the next most at 7. And if you look at that round 2 match against the Tigers, it was 3 kick-ins to Bodie Hewlin, 2 to Noble. Joel Jeffrey didn't take one. Round 1 against the Eagles, it was Hewlin with the most, with 5. So he is taking that, but I don't know. I'm not ready to buy into it just yet. If you actually go back and look at his scoring in the past couple of years, he's done this. He's had a good week or 2 here or there, and then it's kind of fizzled out the next week, and it's just disappeared into thin air. So he's not a proven fantasy player yet, whereas John Noble is. He's proven that last year. I'm happy to back him in again. I think the game will play out very differently to how it played out against the Tigers. I think it could be a bit more competitive and closer. So we'll see. I'm going to back in Noble personally, but I don't mind throwing another Sun in there as that pod. And then, as you can see in the chat there, mate, we've got a comment from TCB. Any love for Bailey Dale this week? With the history he's had against Essendon, how can you not consider him? That's why I've put him in there. But I've also thrown a bonus pod in there too, because I think that with how good that Bombers matchup is, it'd be silly not to be considering as many dogs as you can this week. And he hasn't been great by any means this year, Bailey Dale. He's had scores of 81, 90, and 75. But in saying that, their matchups haven't been amazing either in terms of positional matchup strength. Like, they've played the Lions, the Giants, and the Crows, and they're all fairly neutral, 7, 10, and 11. So when you look at the Bombers, this is their first taste at a really juicy matchup. And in particular, this is Bailey Dale's first taste at a really juicy matchup for 2026. And I think this is one you could be maybe chasing that ceiling score on. And TCB, he alluded to the scoring history that Bailey Dale has on the Bombers there. And if we actually have a look at what that score was, it was a 191, I believe, that score against them. Yeah, 191 last year. And that was off 37 kicks. And then interesting, we all chased that score. I think it was round 20 from memory. We were all chasing that score when they came up against the Bombers again at Marvel Stadium. And he backed it up with an 87. So when we say he's had a really good history scoring against them, it's actually not. The Bombers are actually his worst matchup across the course of his career. It's just that 191 he had last year that really sort of makes us think about him. And again, backing up with that 87, he's one I think is safe this week. I say safe. That's scary. Oh. He's one I think that surely he can't give you a really big floor score, but the ceiling is there. So he's very, very tempting, I think, this week, and he'll be quite popular, I reckon, amongst coaches this week. But Bailey Williams is the interesting one for me. I think he's more the pod than Bailey Dale personally. Like, if you're chasing a big pod, I think it could be a Bailey Williams. What are your thoughts there, mate? Just to wrap up a Bailey Dale, are you keen on him? And what are your thoughts on Bailey Williams instead?
At first thought, I wasn't keen on Bailey Dale just because I haven't really seen anything to suggest that he is the primary ball user in the backline this year for the Dogs. Even in the game against the Lions, he pushed up onto a wing, which obviously we saw last year. He kind of got floated up and down the ground a little bit. So obviously, Lockie Jakes has come on this year, kind of Budrick's come across. They've got a couple more ball users down in that back line now. So it's not Bailey Dale or bust for them anymore, which does concern me a little bit. But yes, he is definitely someone that could take advantage of this matchup and go huge. Obviously, you mentioned it there. 191 is absolutely elite for anyone on any day. So look, once again, I talked about Jordan Clark having the safety there of maybe a 100-point score. But if you are chasing the upside, then Bailey Dale is the play for you. I'm just not sure, and I'm still not sold yet whether or not I will play him this week, just because I am a little bit concerned about his role. Obviously, he is a gun, but just haven't seen it so far this season.
Yeah, that's a fair point there, absolutely. And yeah, like we know he's one that can take advantage of that matchup, and he'll bully that opposition as well, and he'll look for those really short kicks. But it's a great point you raised there about what that market share has been down back and what his role's been this year. So I think that's a pick, probably opposite to those previous picks we've talked about there up above as our options for round 4. This one comes with a little bit more risk, I think, and you're probably really hoping on that matchup and that previous score again. So in terms of a Bailey Williams, have you looked at him at all this week, Haz?
Yes, I have actually, and obviously, Bailey Williams isn't your actual defender in the game. He is a winger who floats up and down and pushes forward, and he's been impacting the scoreboard. So he's available as a defender, and some midfielders, and I'm sure we'll touch on them later with the matchup data with Essendon. They put up monster scores, so he could be a very good shout as a midfielder in our backlines this week, just purely for the fact, and he's shown it already this season, that he can go large with 148 GDS points. So, yeah, tempting. I think if I'm looking for a pod, it's probably, either him or, like as we mentioned, maybe a Joel Jeffrey. But, yeah, just not sold on Dale just yet.
Yeah. And, again, in terms of the percentages played across comps, Bailey Dale was at 12%. And Bailey Williams is at 3.1%. So if you actually look at the scores this year from Bailey Williams, he has had 115, 84, and 148 in his last 3 games, or the 3 games to start this year, I should say. So I think I'm liking a Bailey Williams. I'm probably not going to go there in some of those standard comps, or I might throw a dart in one of them. But yeah, it's definitely one of those interesting ones to be chasing this week. I think if you go one of those dogs, you could be rewarded big time. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And then before I even jump into that other pod there's a comment there about Dan Houston this week up against the Lions, and the Lions potentially conceding a fair bit of points at halfback. They're conceding a little bit. They're, what's that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They're the 7th best matchup for our defenders to be looking at this year playing against the Lions. But for me, it's that Gabba factor. And it's the Big Easter Thursday Gabba factor. And it was what Houston sort of dished up last week. I played him for the first time, and I said on the pod last week, if he doesn't go well, blame me. So I think I might need to be blamed for last week, because he was a little bit underwhelming, unfortunately. Didn't put up an amazing score. And I sort of questioned, did they want to use him as much, or was it just not his night? I couldn't quite work that out. But he's had the last 2 scores last year against the Lions, 52-41. Year before that at Port, 90. Yes, they give up more points to opposition defenders than normal this year, but yeah, I'm just questioning, is he going to be able to get it done? That's my only thing. I feel like there's a bit more trepidation with that pick.
Yeah, I will blame you for that pick, mate. So thanks again for that one. But I'm probably not looking to go there, I think, myself, just like you said, for that Gabba factor. And I think the Lions will actually be up for this game. And I'm definitely playing Josh Dacos, but I don't think I want to play 2. And I think we've talked about some really, really good picks outside of that who have a better matchup. So, yeah, maybe I might play him in one competition and definitely be playing him in prime time. But outside of that, I don't think I'll be going to Houston this week.
Yeah, sounds good. And in terms of another pod as well, in that same game we talked about there before about the Bulldogs and Essendon, I think Archie Roberts might be a sneaky little pod in a standard comp as well. He's had a few scores this year, so 72, 107, and 100. So his last 2 have been pretty solid. That first one you could put down to low time on ground and a very weird role, thanks to Brad Scott. But the last 2 have been more promising. Mason Redman's gone out. He's playing a bit more down back, and we know how good he can be. The Bulldogs are actually the best matchup you can be targeting for opposition defenders. They allow 97.2 GDS points on average, which is, absolutely crazy. When you're thinking about that, you're probably thinking the Bombers are going to be the best, but it's actually the Bulldogs. So if they're giving up that, then I think he could be a little pod. It's just the Essendon factor for me, but I think he'll be pretty solid, and don't be surprised if he puts up a pretty solid score. That could round out your back line nicely. And then obviously our avoid for this week, mate, I've done a bit of digging there. James Sicily, I think he could be one maybe to avoid. He's had a good start to the year with 3 solid scores of 100, 143 and 109. That 143 was against Essendon, though. So we've just talked about how good they are and how many marks they allow to opposition defenders, which is amazing. It was about over 160, I think, for those first 2 weeks. And last week they reduced it a bit down to 138, I think it was, which is still super high. So I look at that 143 and I go, I'm probably not expecting that score from a sick dog. And Cats are a neutral matchup, but he has not scored amazingly, on them across his career. And in fact, his last 3 against the Cats have been 71, 101, and 88. You'd have to go back to 2021 to find a half-decent score that you'd actually take outside of that 101. So he's been in incredible form, but I just think that I'll be chasing some other safety in other players in better matchups, and I'll be chasing a couple other ceilings instead of a sick dog.
Yeah, completely agree, mate. And I'm actually surprised that we haven't spoken about one option who went absolutely ballistic last week back in his role. And obviously he was our pod for last week, and that's Colby McKercher. And he's currently sitting in all my sides. So there's another one for people that we're definitely keen on this week is Colby back in that halfback role for the Kangas. So keep an eye on him as well if that appeals to you.
It was a good shout. We went from we had him in now, obviously our under 22s. We then said avoid him, fade him. We then said he's a pod, and he popped off for a 130 something. So you're welcome if anyone played him. And now we've got him in our squad. It just shows you how quick fantasy footy can change, doesn't it? You've got to really be across the landscape. So if we jump across to midfields, mate, do you want to kick us off with someone there? Pick out someone from that top row. We have Steele. We have a couple of Dockers again as an option. We have a Noah Anderson. Is there anyone you would like to have a bit of a chat about first? Obviously, we've got our plug and plays there on the screen. You can see Dacos, Bont, Smith, Holmes, Butters for this week. He'll not be in that plug and play eventually, but he's got another good matchup. And then Jordan Dawson pending fitness too with that calf. If he's back in, I think he could be a plug and play. Any one of those 3 you'd like to talk about?
Firstly, I'm finding the midfielders really hard to pick this week just for the fact that there are so many options. And they all seem to have good matchups. And that's what I think is making it really hard, is trying to pinpoint, who might have the best matchup. But I will talk about Jack Steele. And, after a bit of a slow start in round 1 against his old side, he was a bit flustered and a little bit uncertain of, what he was doing out in the field. And he even admitted that in the post-match interview. He scored 99, but since then he's come out and gone bang in his last 2 for 156 and 141 points. And he looks like the Jack Steele of old. The Suns do allow 91.4 GDS points to opposition mids, which is the 7th best matchup this season and the 6th best to target this week. Taranto went 127 last week, and Dev Robinson went 117 in round 1. And I think both of those players, if you dig deeper into the stats, probably based their scoring on tackles alone. I know Taranto had 10 last week, and I'm pretty sure Dev Rob had 10 in round 1 as well. Obviously, Maxi Holmes went 126 in opening round for Geelong, and a pretty poor performance for them. So the Suns have been leaking a little bit of points. So it could be another good shout this week is Jack Steele. Last season for the Saints, still put up 141 against the Suns in round 11, and they've been his 5th favourite matchup across his career so far. And obviously these high-scoring games for Steele are obviously off the back of his mark and tackle game. He's looked incredible in the last 2 weeks, tackling like the machine, where he obviously broke the tackle record a couple of years ago. He racked up 16 tackles last week and 9 the week before. So obviously we don't expect 16 tackles every week, but I think he'll be a great pick once again. He said he was, as I said, he was rattled against his old side, but he had 42 points in the last quarter of that game against the Saints in round 1. So he's definitely got form on the board, and he's definitely someone that is warming into majority of my teams.
He was one that I didn't want to put in initially because I feel like I'm just chasing points by putting him in. But yeah, you go back through that historical data too. He loves scoring against the Suns. He had that 141 last year, as you said, and it's very hard to leave him out. I think so. He's one that has worked his way into my squads again, and just looking how good. Like, it's just great for fantasy footy if Jack Steele's playing the way he is. So yeah, I love him as a pick this week again, and he's probably a player you're thinking of like, okay, how much salary am I putting on him? I think that's the conversation he's in at the moment, given that form, and they need him in that midfield too. So if we're going to find someone to accompany him, obviously, again, we've got a handful of plug and play. So it's really a couple of these midfielders we need to top up those last two spots. Could you go the Docker roulette once more? Could you go and flip that coin and just see how your luck is? Because could win you some cash, and it might cost you a top 20. It depends what they dish up. And I might talk you through this one, mate, because you asked beforehand, you said, is Brayshaw a play again this week? And I think he is. I think one of the Dockers boys is going to be a play again this week. Just can't figure out which one it's going to be. If you want to actually follow some trends, we saw obviously Brayshaw down in week 1 and Sarong was up with a 131. Week after, we saw that flip entirely. It was Sarong who put up a 70-something or 80-something from memory, and then Brayshaw was a 148. Flipped again last weekend, 107 from Brayshaw and a 151 from Sarong. So how do you sort of pick that? Like, I'm not quite sure. Could you just follow that trend and say Brayshaw's up and Sarong is going to be down this week? Maybe. But I think the other reason why I'm thinking about maybe one of them, or why you could think about one of them, is that the Crows are a really positive matchup for opposition mids to start 2026, which is not what we normally think of Adelaide. They're actually the third best matchup that you can be chasing, and going off Stats Labs data there. They're allowing 96 GDS points on average to those opposition mids. And again, looking at some of those scores, we've had Basgo 178, Holmes 135, even Dempsey put up 111 playing on that wing. We had Fraser put up 127 just before his bye as well, and that was from 19% CBAs. Libba had 125, Bont 123. Like, there's scores to be had against the Crows, and I'm just sort of thinking, well, maybe we could sort of see that again from these boys. And if we look at the actual scoring, how are we going to split these guys? I think it's actually Brayshaw for me. I think, this is going to sound pretty fake, or not fake, but pretty superficial. But if you follow that trend, it's Brayshaw's week this week. And if you want a bit of data behind it, Adelaide is Sarong's third worst matchup across the course of his career. In his, he's put up 82 and 138 in his last two. They were both at home. If we look at Brayshaw, he's typically been the better scorer against Adelaide. They're his seventh best matchup across his career. And in his last two, he's had 146 and 94 points against the Crows. But again, you can sort of see there that it just flips between them all the time. And it's so hard to sort of pick the right one. I just wonder if we are going to sort of write that narrative and say it's Brayshaw over Sarong, we've got to identify someone going to play on Sarong. Or could there be a Sam Berry who sits on him at stoppages? Could there be a Peatling that runs with him for a little bit? Could it be Dawson going head to head? Like, I'm just not quite sure if anyone does. Where do you sort of sit with that? Would you be looking at one over the other? Are you keen to just avoid both?
Oh, I hate when it's like this. It's flashbacks to Harris Ralph and Peter Siddle in the Big Bash season, where Stu was on that trend all season and it just kept going every single round. And I hope this trend doesn't continue, but I think, trend aside, I'm probably more keen on Brayshaw, obviously just for the fact that Sarong can get tagged. Yes, I don't know who goes to him, but it's probably more of the thing of, he is vulnerable, so that's probably the biggest flag in itself, that if something was to occur like a Sam Berry, his scoring can be impacted. But he's one of those players that you play him, he wins the week. You play him when he gets tagged, he loses you the week. And I think that's just going to be the Caleb Sarong every single time we talk about him, is that flag of whether he's going to get tagged or not. Yes, he's an elite scorer, but even that 152 that he scored last week at halftime, I think coaches were probably worried. Yeah. I think he had nearly 100-point second half to come home like a steam train. So, yeah, I'm not sure. His scoring is up and down like an absolute yo-yo. So if I'm leaning towards anyone, it is probably Brayshaw. And that's probably just flipping the coin. And then I'm not saying that's the trend. I'd probably have more confidence in Brayshaw's scoring ability, even though he has shown this year that he can score low with that 68 as well. So look, maybe I think I might avoid both, to be
Yeah, I
honest.
think in some of those comps you actually can. I think there's lots of really good options. If you look at those plug and plays, it's Dacos, Bont, Smith, Holmes, Butters. If you want to go Dawson, that's 6 already. If you don't go Dawson, you've only got 2 more to pick. I think Jack Steele's almost a walk-up, so that could be your 6th. If you're going Dawson, that's 7 already. So you don't have to go a Brayshaw and Sarong, but I just wanted to flag it because Adelaide are a good matchup, and one of them's popped off each week. So just something to consider if you're keen to play a bit of roulette this week. And then speaking of Noah Anderson, mate, there's been a couple things raised this week. I know that you spoke to me about this, and I sort of had brushed it off initially and gave it a bit more thought. And it's something we probably can't avoid talking about at the moment. In terms of the Melbourne matchup that the Suns come up against, it's actually been a really positive matchup there for Noah Anderson. He's scored pretty well on the Demons in the past. Like the last 3 times, he's put up scores of 136, 135, and 105. It's his 3rd favourite matchup across the course of his career. We know he's got a ceiling. He's hit scores in the 140s and a 151 last year too. And I was thinking that's what I'm chasing this week. I want to put him in. He hasn't popped off yet this year. He hasn't hit that ceiling score. And I just felt there's a narrative now where we thought it was going to be those 2 weeks before his bye, and it didn't happen. And I thought there's every chance he's going to come out and do it this week. So I do sort of worry that, a Colton Tolstrup, like you mentioned, might go to him and spend some time on him. He's done some tagging jobs on Naz. He kept Sarong really quiet in that round 1 game, I believe it was. Was it round 1 or round 2? They played round
Round
2.
2.
And then last week, we thought he was going to go to Sam Walsh, but he might have spent a bit of time on Paddy Cripps, I think, from memory. But I just wonder, did he start on Walsh and then go across to Cripper? Because I thought Cripper's score was going really well at quarter time and then just slowed down.
He actually started on the bench.
Tagging the
So
pine.
he didn't. Yeah, he didn't start on anyone, and the commentators kind of made note of that. And he went to Cripps at a couple of stoppages, but I don't think he ran with him for the majority of the game. And Walsh obviously scored that 126, as you mentioned, and obviously we flagged that as our void last week. And he scored well for coaches that went against that and picked him. But I think Melbourne kind of just have to go back to that tag. With Petrarca out, Rao out, who do you shut down next? And it's Noah Anderson. He's probably their most impactful player now. If you shut down him outside of it's Took Miller, who's probably the next best midfielder. So if I was the coach of Melbourne, I'd definitely be sending Tolstrup to him. Obviously, we know how well he done against Sarong and Wang. So, yeah, I'd be sending him to Anderson, and it's definitely a big flag for me.
Yeah, and a comment there from Jonathan in chat too. Started on Cripps, then he came on and has said, and then Sparrow went to Cripps in the second half. So even having Sparrow as that defensive midfielder or someone who can sort of quiet them down, it is something to keep in mind. And yeah, it's just, do you want to go and chase that score that might be there, like given his scoring history on them and the fact they've been pretty positive so far this year for mids who aren't getting tagged, like Brayshaw put up that big score against them. It's just one that I've sort of cooled on as the week has progressed. And as we've discussed, mate, I think that there's actually a couple points of difference sitting there that I'd actually be a bit more comfortable in. And I know the tag's not going to them and they have a better matchup as is. So I think that's where I'm at. I'm not convinced on a Noah Anderson this week, but I do want to just flag it. He's a great matchup and he's got great scoring data against them in the past. And I might even circle back to the points of difference, mate. You just mentioned Sammy Walsh. He was our avoid last week. He's our avoid again this week. And for a couple of reasons. I think the big one is the fact that for me, I actually just haven't been convinced by how he's looked. He just hasn't. He's looked great. It's probably the Carlton eye test. They're not passing the eye test. And I'm just really worried because he's not looking to really get those short kicks and get those marks and bump that score up. He's having to work so hard to build his score, and he worked incredibly hard over the weekend and just managed that 126. So I just feel like, mate, if Bont worked as hard as Sam Walsh does, Bont would put up over 200 every single time. But he's just not getting those sort of scores. And North are actually the second hardest matchup for opposition mids this year. They've only been allowing 82.1. And I think it was somewhere, it might have been further up in the chat there as well about Foss potentially. Sullivan, obviously tagging Zach Merritt last week. Could he come out and do a job again on Sam Walsh? It's a bit of this tag flag, this tag chat. Do we want to throw that risk in? But I think if you look at that, if Sullivan did that to Zach Merritt last week, there's every chance they could do it again to Sam Walsh this week. We know he's been susceptible. And North are actually a tough matchup to start this season. He's actually not ticking a lot of boxes for me this week, and I think he's another one that we could be avoiding. Unfortunately, for a second week in a row, as much as I love Sam Walsh, I just don't think he's one we can go to.
Yeah, and it's a shame because, like you said, he has been working so hard, and he's someone that has a high handball game over kicks. And obviously, like you said, he hasn't been getting those marks. So he's racking up the disposals. He's had over 30 disposals every game this season, but he's had more handballs than kicks every single game. And he's only had a high of 4 marks from those 3 games. So probably not someone, once again, that has a ceiling score. And if we're probably chasing, these big dogs in the midfield, if that flag is potentially there just with a tag, even if it doesn't eventuate, I just don't think he has that ceiling. And like you said, North are a tricky matchup so far this year, and they're Walsh's worst matchup across his whole career. So they're probably, once again, not one for me this week, and I'm definitely happy to avoid.
Yeah, Carlton parked the bus in the second half or last quarter as well, and they just haven't looked very good moving the footy too. So I don't know, he's just not working for those 45s to get those marks, and yeah, just one that I think I'll be passing on as well. And now in terms of those other mids we're looking at instead of a Sam Walsh, they're a bit more confident in. I think there's 2 from the doggies you could be looking at, and that's a bit of a theme this week, is there's always a couple dogs in each position you could be looking at. I think Ed Richards is less of the pod, and Matt Kennedy is more of the pod personally, but I think they're 2 options we could be genuinely considering. We've got, Ed Richards there. He scored 162 in that first round, which was an amazing score. And I played him as well in my challenger side too, which really helped me that particular week. And if he's got that sort of ceiling coming up against the Bombers there, I think this could be an absolute bloodbath. And we know all those mids can score really well together. So I think they're ones we could really be looking at. If we look at their past scoring, Richards has had 120 and 123 in his last 2 games against them, and they've been a pretty positive matchup for him across the course of his career. We also know Ed Richards has really only come on as one of those top dog midfielders in the last 12 months. So I think that data could even be better. And given what the Bombers are doing, they are the best matchup for opposition mids to target. They are the number 1 easiest. They allow 107.7 GDS points on average to opposition mids. And I want every piece of that I can. I reckon there's a case to make that you could, I was going to say should, you could play at least 2 dogs this week in your midfield in Bont and Richards, or you could go at Bont and Kennedy if you want to be a bit more poddish, or why not throw all 3 in for a bit of fun?
Yeah, I think chasing the matchup and chasing the ceiling, we just mentioned with Sam Walsh, he's probably one that doesn't have it. But like you mentioned, Ed Richards' ceiling is definitely there to on show. And we saw that in opening round against the Lions, who are typically a pretty hard matchup for midfielders. So he exploded. And Kennedy, he's just super consistent, obviously averaging 122 for the year. He's been pretty good against Bombers for his career. So, yeah, I'm definitely looking to play 2, if maybe not 3. 3 obviously is scary because if, whatever reason the Dons remember how to play football, could be a bit of a terrible week. But the matchups there, the roles there, the securities there, and the points should be there as well. There's so much success against Essendon this year. And if we're just talking about the average alone of 107, these boys will cruise past that with ease. And obviously so will Bont. So, yeah, I like in the matchup.
Yeah, if we look at the played percentages, Ed Richards is currently the 11th most popular midfielder. So probably is that bit of that pod if we're talking about, those top 7 mids. But yeah, Kennedy's definitely the bigger pod out of the 2. He's the 19th most popular midfielder to select this week, sitting at 11.4%. So he could be a bit of a pod ticket there for you out of the 2. And obviously Josh Dunkley as well hasn't been in great form, but he could be a bit of a pod as well. Collingwood being a neutral matchup. We saw Callaghan still put up a good score last week of 132 against them. And I think if you actually go back and look at a Josh Dunkley, for example, I like him out of all the Lions this week. His previous scoring's been the best out of all the mids for the Lions against the Pies. He's had 125, 131 and 112 in his last 3 against them. And that 112 was in that same Easter Thursday game last year where the Lions got absolutely pantsed. And the other mids like Neil and Ashcroft put up GDS scores of 89 and 49 respectively. So Yeah, he's the Lions mid I like most this week, and he's definitely a pod you could play because I think, again, a bit of that narrative, that footy narrative we like to talk about. I think the Lions will be better than what they were last year in this Easter Thursday game, and I think it'll be off the back of Dunks, who's going to turn around some form. So I think he's the one that you could be looking at there.
Yeah, I think I mentioned it a couple of weeks ago about Dunkley. He's one of 3 co-captains now, and Harris Andrews obviously was out with the suspension, and Hugh McCluggage just keeps getting pushed back weeks and weeks and weeks. But I just think Dunkley's going to keep standing up and as that sole captain when the Lions really need him. And he had the 121-point performance against the Swans, but outside of that, like you mentioned, he hasn't really offered a whole lot. His mark game's down, his kick game's down, his tackles are obviously always going to be there. But if the ball's not in the contest, I'm worried about his scoring in transition.
Yeah.
So, definitely a pod, but probably not someone that I'm looking to play with the amount of options that we've got this week.
And just for Tom, mate, who are you looking at playing? Give me a 7, please, and salary.
No.
Hey,
sorry, Tom.
on Dunkley there, mate, I completely agree with what you've said there. That inability to score in transition this year, and probably reflects Lions' form a little bit, and probably reflects why he's a pod and not one of those options to consider. And there was a little comment in the chat there as well before we move on to our rucks, mate. LDU this week. What form LDU has been in this year? Hey, we had him as an option last week, and he rewarded coaches with a 141. So he's had 3 great scores, or actually 2 good scores and 1 great score to start this year. The reason why we don't have him as an option there's lots of really good options. I think he's still a good one. I think you definitely can still play him because they're up against Carlton. They're the 4th easiest matchup at the moment for opposition mids, and that they're conceding an average of 93.6 GDS points. We saw what Cozzy did to them last week. We saw what Jack Steele did to them. I think there could be some similarities between LDU and a Jack Steele as well. So I think you could back in LDU's form here, but just make note that Carlton aren't a great matchup for LDU in the past. His last 4 against them have been 108, 85, 107, 91. But again, there's been a shift in Carlton this year, and LDU's in great form, so I don't mind him again this week.
Yeah, love that. He was massive last week, and obviously, that Essendon matchup definitely helped. He had, I think, double-digit marks for probably one of the first time in his career, so definitely made it, took advantage of that matchup, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
Before we do move on, though, sorry, mate, before we do move on, there is another comment in the chat, Jenneth, for under 22s, which we kind of haven't touched on a little bit yet. Either Xavier Lindsay or George Wardlaw. Now, without looking at data into it too much, I'd probably go Xavier Lindsay just for the role. Yeah. He is playing off half-back. Obviously, George Wardlaw is probably playing low time on ground, still coming back from those injuries. Yes, he is playing Carlton, but I'd probably go Lindsay just for that half-back role. More kicks, probably access to kick-ins as well. So that's the pick for me.
I agree. And, North Melbourne's midfield's looking pretty good too. I think that he'll still have that low time in there as well. So, I completely agree with that Xavier Lindsay shout, and I'll be probably playing a Xavier Lindsay again this week. He's been a solid contributor to our under-22 side this year. Now, talk me through the ruck, mate. What are we doing with our rucks this week? We've got Tristan Xerri. He's rubbed himself out for 3 matches, doing an absolute silly act there on the footy field. So we've got 3, really, don't we? It's Gawn, English, and Grundy. Is that right?
Well, that's it. So we've decided to change it around this week. Obviously, we have our plug-and plays, but I think our plug-and plays we kind of need to talk about, and obviously they are the 3 big dogs up the top there. So they are probably the 3 clear options for round 4, just based on matchup. Obviously, we do still have Luke Jackson, obviously there as well as the pod. But I think if we're looking to pick, obviously 2 of them, for me, it's probably Gawn and English. But you can look at a Grundy. Obviously, Max Gawn, he's averaged 139 GDS points this season, and he's coming off the back of 145 and 151, which is just insane over the last 2 weeks. He had something like 50 hitouts on the weekend.
Wow.
But the Suns have allowed the 3rd fewest GDS points on average to opposition rucks this season at 68.5. In the last 3 games, Gawn has gone 195 and 93 points against the Suns. So he has given away 10 free kicks while only receiving 1 in those games. And he only averages 32.6 hitouts in those 3 games as well. So Witsy has proven to be a bit of a difficult matchup for Gawn in the last couple of seasons. But Nank managed to score 99 GDS points against Witsy from his 51% time on ground before he did his hamstring in round 2. So I think if we're just looking at obviously Nank to Gawn, matchup aside, Gawn's just on another level at the moment. Might be a tough matchup on paper, but even if it is, we know his floor is extremely safe. And obviously after last week, we had so many good options, so many good matchups. Tristan Sherry was underwhelming. Jackson was underwhelming. And obviously Darcy Cameron, who's down there, as our avoid, was underwhelming. So Gawn's the clear big dog. I think you just got to lock him in this week and choose based on the matchup who's your second ruckman.
Yeah.
And for me, as I mentioned, it's probably Tim English. He's averaging 119.3 GDS points for the season. And that's coming off a bit of an underwhelming 96 GDS performance against the Crows in round 2. The Bombers have surprisingly only allowed 64.5 GDS points this season to opposition rucks, making them the second hardest matchup. And I know last week you sat here, talking about Sherry coming into Blackerson matchup, and he hadn't really come against anyone of note yet, but he definitely held his own last week against Tristan Sherry. So I think we can put Blackerson down as a bit of a difficult matchup just for his ability to, work around the ground and, block off those marks and tackles. So definitely something to consider. But English's last 2 scores against the Bombers have been 118 and 109 in their last 2 matchups. But obviously he hasn't rucked against Blackerson though. So those matchups data probably doesn't really mean a whole lot. I think you just got to look at English the player and pretty much just pick that based on what he can produce on any given week. What are your thoughts, mate?
Yeah, I think it's hard to go past. I think coaches nearly did, or a lot of coaches did, or some coaches did, I should say, faded Max Gawn last week. And yeah, there was nothing worse than on a Sunday you're seeing Max Gawn put up a big, 151, I think it was, just to take your round away from you. So I'm glad that we ended up playing him there. But yeah, this week I think I'm a Gawn and English as well, because the scary thing for me is if I'm chasing the West Coast matchup, it's a scary proposition, fading Gawn or English. So I'm not sure I've got the guts to do that. But if you do want to go there, the West Coast Eagles are the best matchup for opposition rucks. They're allowing a huge 128.3 GDS points on average. We saw, Sherry went 168 on them in round 2. Big Witsy, who we ruled out at the start of the year in terms of being a genuine option, put up 129 in round 1 and proved us wrong. So it's there that he can. But I remember chasing this matchup last year and I got burned, as did most coaches, because Grundy actually doesn't score well against the Eagles. If we look at in that past, his last 3, 96, 107 and 136. And that 136 was when he was still at the Demons. So his most 2 recent games, 96 and 107. This year, we've obviously seen him put up that sort of 1 down sort of score, which was an underwhelming 61 points against the Lions. Surely we're not seeing that, right? Surely we're not going to get a 61 here. If you're picking Grundy, you're chasing the ceiling. I'm just a little bit scared for some reason. What do you think?
No, I completely agree. I think obviously, like you said, the matchup definitely there. The West Coast and Matt Flynn have allowed a lot of points to Ruckman this season, but I don't know, Grundy just doesn't seem to be his piggish self at the moment. And obviously that will change at some point, and it could very well be this week.
It could.
But I'm looking to go, probably with the safety of the other 2. And I think Grundy probably has a ceiling, but I think, once again, the floor probably does scare me a little bit. So I'm going to play on the safe side, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And now there's a bit of a theme amongst these last 3. Hey, the 2 points of difference in Jackson and McAndrew, and obviously our 1 to avoid in Darcy Cameron. Dual ruck setup is the theme, because there's rumours that Riley O'Brien has been in some blistering form in the 2s over there in Adelaide in the Sandful, and reports that he might be coming back into the side, which could mean they're rolling with 2 rucks to go battle up against Sean Darcy and Luke Jackson for the Freo Dockers. So we had him there as our point of difference if you wanted to go there. And he's probably a play in the primetime competition, but this could change things. This could change what his scoring might be in terms of that primetime comp and his validity as a bit of a pod. So I think amongst those 3, mate, I'm probably not keen to chase any of them. And for Luke Jackson in particular, because we've talked about his ability to roll through the midfield, and he's one of those rucks where if soon as Sean Darcy's out, he's a genuine option. And in a good matchup, he's still another good option as a pod as well. But yeah, I'm just not keen to go for any of those three this week with the matchups and the dual ruck setups.
No, completely agree. I was red hot on Jackson last week. Obviously, you were as well, before that Cyclone Narelle news kind of hit. And I was like, I'm gonna completely avoid that because I just didn't know how or what his role would look like in the wet on how he would score. And yeah, we take aside that one big game that he's had. He's had 80s, I think, in both the other games. So he does have a bit of inconsistent scoring in him. So yeah, no, I'm definitely looking to avoid that one, even though Adelaide, like you mentioned earlier, are allowing a little bit of points to midfielders if he does potentially get some time in there, but you just can't rely on it. He does play a lot of deep forward as well. So yeah, I'm not going there this week.
Yeah, sounds good. And with Cherry out for 3 weeks as well, they're going to have to bring a ruckman in over there at the Kangaroos, and I've got Mark Pitton at there, big Mr. Worldwide, as an option in our primetime competition. And to be fair, he's probably firming as the number one spot, R1 for me in primetime, which is interesting. I never thought I'd be saying that. That's for sure. Now, forwards, mate, in terms of our plug and plays, we've got Harry Sheasel, Brian Myers, and your boy, Cozzy Pickett, who you backed in the Sunday Showdown. In terms of the other options, it's hard to go past a Sam Darcy this week, hey?
Yeah, and we saw the GDS shorts expert Tom post on the GameDay Squad official website today that Sam Darcy is his lock of the round, and I think I completely agree with Tom, and I know I'm going head-to-head with him this week in round 3 of the Cup, so we'll see who puts on more salary, and I'm not going to give away any secrets, Tom, if you are listening, but he's definitely in my side. And that's really without setting the competition alight so far this season. He's averaged 85 GDS points, but that only comes with a high score of 107 against the Giants in round 2. And the Bombers have allowed 73 GDS points on average to opposition forwards this season, which sees them rank as the 3rd easiest matchup for opposition forwards. He's played 2 career games against the Bombers, and they rank as the easiest team for him to score against for his career so far. Scores of 142 in round 20 last season and 105 in round 5 of 2024. That 142-point performance came last season from 16 disposals, which were 12 kicks, 8 marks, 2 tackles, and 6 goals. So highlighting that Essendon probably don't really have anyone to go with him in this matchup. And I think he's definitely going to look to take advantage and really kick a big bag and, really stamp his authority on the season because he hasn't really done it yet. So if we're looking at key forwards that have scored well against the Bombers so far this season, Larkey scored 65 last week, which was a little bit underwhelming. But Lukosha scored 118. Georgiades scored 95 in round 2. Nick Watson, he's a bit of a small forward. And obviously Dylan Moore as well scored 130 and 119, as well as Jack Ginnivan 113. And then obviously Gunston as well, 102. So they just had forwards galore score over a ton in that matchup in round 1 against the Bombers, the Hawks did. So the matchup's there. I think it's only a matter of time before Darcy finds his rhythm and has that big ceiling game that we're waiting for. And I think Sunday night will definitely be it. And I think he could easily kick 5+.
Yeah, I think so. And for me, it's his probably work around the ground as well. And he's not as reliant on those marks and goals. They almost just boost his score, to be honest. He can still find a way to score without having to rely on those. So I do really like him for that. And that was what I flagged about Nick Larkey last week and why I was keen to go for a Josh Tracy over a Nick Larkey for that exact reason. Nick Larkey still kicked a couple of goals from memory and his score was pretty average. Tracy kicked 4, granted, but he did so much. He took 12 marks and looked incredible. And I feel like Darcy sort of falls into that boat of not being super reliant on those marks. And then a good question there in the chat as well about a Rochelle there, who's another option for us on screen. Rochelle, if Dawson is back. I think Rochelle is a real play this week because he's going to be so popular across competitions. And we know that he can score quite well, particularly off last week's performance. And I think this is just one that I'm happy to pick him, even if I know there's going to be a little bit of a regression coming this week because Dawson's back. He will not score the same as what he did last week. That was his best game ever. If he does, I'll be extremely surprised and very happy I've played him. But he's not going to score that last week. That's just not the case. Dawson comes back in. He's taking a market share of those points, and it will affect Josh Rochelle. We will see him regress a little bit. But the reason why I like him is because off that game, how do you leave him out of the midfield? Like, to me, he was clearly their best midfielder, and he's provided a look to that Adelaide midfield that they've been craving. And to me, it's a Rankin. I'm avoiding a Rankin because there's no way he's going to get a look in. If Rochelle's in that sort of form, I just think that he's still going to have access to points. They're up against Freo. They're at home. I think he's more of a chance to hit the scoreboard this week as well. So I really like a Josh Rochelle again, even if Dawson is back. Would you concur with that, Haz?
Yeah, I definitely agree. Obviously, like you said, Dawson was out last week and Rochelle attended a season high 64% CBAs. And that was after games of 35 and 52 to start the season. So obviously, like you said, there probably is going to be a bit of regression there. But obviously, those two first games did lead to scores of 97 and 116 GDS points, respectively. So he's still having enough time in the midfield to score well. He's still up and down the ground. He's still impacting in the forward line. And I think he's just a live wire. And he definitely burnt me last week because I did think that he couldn't keep the scoring up. And yeah, I faded him. And that really cost me. So I'm not going to play that risky game again this week. And I think I'm locking him into all my sides just purely for that factor alone. But if we're looking at his previous matchups against the Dockers, if you are a little bit worried about the matchup itself and maybe his role, Freo have been relatively restricted to forwards this season, allowing only 61.8 GDS points, which is the fifth lowest in the competition. And Rochelle does not have an appealing scoring history. He's registered scores of 63 and 53 in his last two meetings, with a high of 13 disposals and a goal in those games. In both games, though, he had 0% CBAs and played solely as a forward. So I think we just got to take that with a grain of salt. I think his role is different. He's different as a player, and Adelaide are looking to use him differently this season. So you've just got to put that matchup aside. And we saw Sam Lawler score 85 points last week in a pretty similar role. Cozzy scored 89 in round two, and then Myers and Mena obviously scored 107 and 97 in round one against the Dockers, working up and down the ground as well. So there's points there for those hybrid half forwards or midfielders. So Rochelle's definitely got some action coming his way this week.
Yeah, absolutely. Pick him, I reckon. I'm very happy, even with Dawson coming back. Now, mate, who else on screen there would you like to talk about? Do we want to go straight into an Isaac Rankin as well as that avoid, just to sort of follow on from that Rochelle convo? Because I think for me, that role is just absolutely disgusting, playing as that deep forward. Did he have no midfield time? Am I right in saying
that? No, he did have CBAs last week. I think he had 5%, so he only had a couple.
Yeah.
But obviously, he was being tagged by Mullen, and I think they were just trying to put him out of sight, out of mind, because he wasn't impacting the game at all, obviously, for a score of 32 GDS points with a goal as well. So just the 7 disposals, and gave away 3 free kicks. And even before that, though, he didn't get tagged in his first game of the season against the Dogs, where he scored 78 points. And that was from 16 disposals, 2 marks and 3 tackles and a goal from those 32% CBA. So he's just not looking like the superstar X Factor player that we've known and love from previous seasons.
Yeah.
And until we kind of see something more from him, no doubt he's an absolute gun, but I'm not touching him until I see a better role or a bit of effort and intensity from him and, looking back to his best.
Yeah, I agree. We've got to see something, even just a hint that role is going to be different. And I think as soon as we see that, we could jump on him. But yeah, not when Rochelle's in that sort of form and Dawson coming back in and the Crows just ticking along. So I think, I agree completely with that, mate. And there was a comment there in the chat there too about a Josh Tracy, and that sort of piqued my interest. What about Tracy if Worrell and Butts miss? So I'm not across how those defenders are going this week in terms of their fitness. But in terms of a Tracy pod play, again, I think you could go there given his form. And if you look at the data as well, in terms of the Freo Dockers well, actually, they're not a very good matchup for opposition forwards. They've allowed 59.1 points on average, the second hardest matchup for opposition forwards. If you look at Tracy's previous scoring history, his last two, he's had 95 and 75 GDS points against them, respectively. So he's not jumping out to me this week as he did last week in terms of what he's done. And the fact it's played over at Adelaide is another thing I'm a little bit concerned of. But I think you still can go there as a pod play, pending what's happening with those defenders and just given the form that he's in. He's in incredible form and he's marking everything. And I saw a funny meme at the start of the week that Josh Tracy could have saved the dinosaurs if he had been back there, just marking absolutely everything that's coming into his atmosphere. So, yeah, I think he could, but I'm probably not going to play him this week or not even look at him really just because of a few of those things I've just mentioned. Who else you keen to chat about there, Haz?
Interesting to know about Tracy. Obviously, I think he's the third highest scoring forward as a key forward this season, which is extremely impressive. And obviously, he's basing his game on high marks and high goals, but they just look to use him in absolutely everything. And I think moving forward, they're going to look to use him even more. So I don't mind the pod shout at all. And I think you misspoke, Pitty. You were talking about the Freo Dockers data there. He plays for the Freo Dockers, man. So Adelaide are they're a neutral matchup, so they allow 67.8 GDS points. So maybe if those boys do miss,
I'm glad he doesn't
look to go there.
Maybe avoid him in an intra club then. Might be a fade there, but yeah. I'm not loving it this week, but yeah, his form is incredible, and it's hard to ignore last week. Talk me through a Justin McInerney as well, because he's one I'm looking at in my squads, but I'm not sure I want to go there in each competition.
Yeah, so he is averaging 114 GDS points this season, thanks to that impressive opening round performance against the Blues, where he scored 145, which was obviously a career best performance for him, thanks to 31 disposals, 5 marks, 3 tackles and 3 goals, while having 34% CBAs in a full-strength Sydney midfield. His last 2 games, he's digressed a little bit, but he's been extremely reliable for coaches, scoring 99 and 98 GDS points against the Lions and Hawks in round 1 and 2, while he's increased his CBAs to 50 in round 2 before a career high 70% CBAs in round 2, obviously due to the injuries of Goulden and Heaney. And I'm expecting this role to continue again this week, even with the potential return of that superstar Isaac Heaney from injury. I think McInerney's just added a little bit of a different dimension to their midfield now that Errol Goulden is out, and they are looking to play Chad Warner forward a little bit more. So I do like McInerney. He's kind of migrated off from the wing and into that midfield mix, and he's pushing forward, obviously, as well, and kicking goals, which we love to see. And obviously, we normally chase the West Coast matchup, but they're holding their heads pretty high this season. Yeah. They've only allowed 62 GDS points on average to opposition forward, which is actually the 6th hardest matchup in the competition. But if we're looking at McInerney's past against West Coast, it's the 6th best matchup across his career. His last 3 scores have been 96, 108, and 103, which was their most recent matchup at Optus Stadium. So there is consistency there. Obviously, he hasn't gone below 98 GDS points this season. The role's probably there as well, hovering around 50% CBAs. Track scored 128 in round 1 in that hybrid forward midfield role. He's just a gun and scored 151, and Simpkins scored 98 in round 2 as well, playing a similar role to what McInerney might. So there's definitely scoring pedigree there this season against the Eagles in a similar role. So he's probably looking to be maybe my 7th forward in all my teams. And I'm probably going to be rolling him out maybe in just 2 out of my 3 standard comps, just to look to diversify, like you kind of said as well.
Yeah, and which competition would you look to not play him in?
I'm not sure if that's trying to get insight for Tom. I haven't decided yet.
Fair. I was just going to see if you can give it to us. That was all. And mate, just to round out these forwards, we'll do this really quick, but obviously Aaron Norton and Sean Manor we could be looking at too. So we've spoken about that Bombers matchup a bit tonight, so we won't go there too much. But he's scored well on them in the past as well. Like in that last 3, he's had 140 in one of those games in one of his last 3. So that's one where he kicked 7 goals. I think if we think there's going to be goals down there, he could be the pot. He could be the one you could play a Darcy and maybe a Norton as well. and that could be quite good. We've also got Sean Manor, who's come into the form as well. He had a bit of a slow start in that first game, 63 points against the Suns there at People First Stadium. But yeah, I mean, his last couple have just been great, and particularly over the weekend as well. That 116 was just unreal for coaches who picked him on that Thursday night.
Yeah, coming back to Norton, even this season, he's had a ceiling score already against the Giants. He scored 149, thanks to 15 disposals, 11 marks, and 6 goals. So he is in the form of his life. We talked about Sam Darcy not really stamping his authority on the season so far, but Norton rocks up each and every week.
Yep.
He'll have his 6 to 8 marks, kick a couple goals. So as a pod, I'm like, obviously I talked about Sam Darcy being a lock in my side. The decision for me is whether to take the risk of playing both of them, and basically, going eggs in the basket for the matchup and hoping both of them have a field day and kick a bag each. Obviously, they kicked 13 goals between them last year. Or do I kind of play it safe and only play one in my standard competition, just as I mentioned, in case the Bombers somehow, pull something from the clouds and, manage to play some decent footy and pull an upset over the Doggies this week. And that's the decision I'm toying with at the moment.
They're not going to pull an upset over the Doggies. You can stop worrying about that right now. They'll go nowhere near them, unfortunately. But it just might be a matter of that market share down there. That's all, and how that's distributed. And then, happy to move on there in terms of those.
Before we do, we can see on the screen there, Jennifer said, "Pitty, you are cheeky." And yes, Jennifer, he is Tom's inside man. I thought we were good mates, but he's trying to get all my secrets out for the matchup this week just because Tom flicked him a message. So I don't know what Tom's offered him, but yeah, he's trying to play undercover there a little bit for Tom, which is a little bit disappointing.
Few handy packs, Tom said. He said he'd slip me a few packs if I could just get some screenshots over to him. So I'll be working on that in the meantime. But again, just for everyone there, that there are contender teams that we have put together for this week rolling forward. And Haz, mate, that looks like a safer team than what you normally roll out in a contender.
Oh, mate, my contender team's absolute shambles at the moment. That season position of 49. The pod team's not going too well. So still some pods in there. And that is probably not finalised. I think I'm probably going to take Noah Anderson out, obviously, after our discussion about that tag potential there against the Ds. So that might probably become maybe an Ed Richards or a Jack Steele potentially. But yeah, other than that, I'm liking, obviously, those big dogs in that midfield there, all those plug and plays. And obviously, Bailey Williams is back there in my backline as my pod at the moment.
Yeah, I like that. And Shawsey as well mentioned Zach Bailey as an option. I like Bales as an option for our forward line. I'm rolling him out in my classic and my challenger sides. I just wanted to have a few more forwards in that contender team, and he might come back in for a McInerney, for example. I'm not quite sure where I'm going to split those last couple forwards, but I really like a Zach Bailey this week. I was keen on him last week. He put up a nice 105 and he scored 100 of those points in the last 3 quarters, mind you. So I like him again this week, as hard as he was to watch in that first quarter, but he just gets involved up the ground and yeah, he can hit the scoreboard. So I do really like a Zach Bailey. My one tip this week is don't get sucked into a Shea Bolton. Just don't pick him. We talked about this as he was a potential fade. I'll be very surprised if he goes back and hits another big score. I'll be very surprised if he goes above 70, to be honest. So, mate, I think that team that's pretty standard. Hey, we've got Josh Worrell for both of us in our backlines. We haven't really spoken about. We've both gone a Clark short, and you've obviously got your Bailey Williams there too. We both like McKercher as well. We think he's a good pick.
Yep.
Both rolling a Gawn and an English, but again, be aware that we're rolling out a Grundy in our challenger side, so we are trying to get a bit of that matchup somewhere as well. We still like that, but just probably opting for a bit of safety. Hey.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And just coming back, I know we would need to move on, but Bailey, the Pies have allowed 72.7 GDS points to opposition forwards this season, ranking them as the 4th easiest matchup. And Rochelle and Neil Bullen have scored 116 and 117 points respectively in round 1 against them in a similar role to what Zach Bailey will be playing. So, yeah, that's a big reason why he is in my sides this week.
Okay, I'll be putting him back into all 3 of my sides then. Thank you, Haz. And Tom, you can pretty much guarantee that he's in Haz's classic side. So pencil that in and we'll figure out the rest of the jigsaw puzzle tomorrow. Now, Haz, over to you, mate.
So here is our consensus squad for the Stats Lab primetime competition. Massive shout out to the Stats Lab team for their ongoing support of the Fantasy Bros. Make sure you head to the statslab.app and check out the awesome tool they have available. Player stats from every game, matchup strength, player comparisons, plus plenty of analysis tools to help you dominate Game Day Squad. And all the stats that we brought to you tonight are from Stats Lab. So if you are looking to, go back and remind yourself of some of the matchup datas or their previous performances, that is all there on the Stats Lab site. So make sure you jump over there. And then you can see on screen there, we do have our consensus primetime team. Now, obviously, Pitty, we are pretty new to Game Day Squad, so we aren't, equipped with millions and millions of diamonds, unlike some coaches out there in the Discord community, that's for sure. But that's where the consensus there is. We're rolling out in our prime time this week. Obviously, the salaries differ because we've only probably got a couple of those higher rarity players in our standard competitions, but we're all keen on, those locks there. And we can see a Darcy Wilmot Platt, which would be a good matchup against the Pies. Dan Houston, obviously someone we talked about a little bit. Luke Parker was mentioned as a bit of a pod for the standard competitions earlier. And obviously against Carlton could be a good shout in our midfield. We've gone to Caleb Sarong over in Andy Bray in that midfield, flipping a coin there, going against the trend. Obviously, you talked about Mr. Worldwide there in the ruck, and we might potentially have to replace Mick Andrew with maybe a Luke Jackson if Rob gets named.
Yep.
And then obviously there's the big forwards there as well that could kick a big bag this week.
Yeah, I like it. And just for those as well, when you're looking at the played percentages on Stats Lab, you can filter by the special comps as well as each standard competition. So if we look at the consensus prime time and how our back line stacks up against it, the top 7 defenders, the most popular defenders for prime time, Dan Houston is the most. Dan Houston is the most popular, 36.7%. Josh Dacos second, Josh Worrell third, Zorko, Clark, Wayne Miller, interestingly, and Braden Maynard as number 7. So, yeah, they're our top 7 defenders in prime time based on the coaches that have selected them. So, if you look at your Caleb Daniel that we have, a Darcy Wilmot, a Colby McKercher, like they're sort of all outside that just at the moment. So, yeah, it's interesting and it's good competition. It's been sourcing me a nice 9-player rare pack each week. So, I've been enjoying that. Now, moving on. BroDown ShowDown. A nice win for Haz this week. You've been out of form, mate, and you've been struggling. I've been trying to say, come on, mate, it's all good. Like, get back on the pod. I'll give you a win. So here's your win, and thanks for coming on. And he was very happy he got that win. That was a nice little thing to pick him up at the start of the week.
Mate, that's not a win.
How can you beat that in Cozzy Pickett? Like, just dominating.
That's a demolition. That's not a win. Come on, you didn't even rock up to play.
I reckon coaches who got the first pick there and who got the first pick in the midfield and then who got the first pick again in the forward line. I reckon that's pretty clear cut there and it's reflected in the scoring. So, congratulations to you. You deserve it. And congratulations to everyone who got behind Haz last week in the BroDown ShowDown. So we've got a 9-player all-star common pack that we are going to roll. And, yeah, lots of people getting behind you, mate. And
mate, why is your name on there?
I picked you.
You can't win that pack.
So I'm in there. Well, we make the rules, so I'll chuck myself in there, and I'll consider if I want to give those cards away. But it's only one row. It's only one row, and you'll get the rest. Hey, you get the other 2 rows. So let's see who wins. Can I get myself a few cards? No, I can't.
Good.
It's going to be
I'm
Bella.
glad it's not you.
Well done there, Bella. Good job, mate. All right, so we'll jump across here to our Game Day Squad platform and we'll get ripping this pack. I'll just refresh that screen there too. So, mate, have a think. Do you want me? I haven't done this for a little while, actually. Would you like me to pick the row for Bella?
Yeah, why not? You can pick it.
Sounds good. Let's have a look. Okay, I might give him the middle row. I'll go the middle row for Bella. So we'll flip those first. Silver. Oh, sorry, Bella. Hopefully it's a good one. Oh, that's a good one. Sam Walsh. That's very handy cards. Silver Jake Lloyd and a Silver Sam Berry. That's pretty good, actually. So, Bella, mate, hit us up in the Discord. They're yours for picking Haz. And now, Haz, these are yours, mate. So, let's see what you've got. Silver Jai Simpkin, Gold Perez from the Giants, and a Gold Ollie Wiltshire.
Okay.
Bottom row, Silver Harry, Silver Hayden Young.
Okay.
Oh, and a Platt Hamilton for the Giants. So a Platt in
Not
there as
bad.
well. A couple of handy little cards there. Mackay, yeah, Simpkin
Yeah.
and Young. That's pretty good. So you'll take those for
100%.
sure. And again, Bella, mate, hit us up in the Discord there, and there'll be your cards as well that you can access. So, mate, let's jump across. Let's have a look at rounding out this episode. It's been a big one, lots to talk about. Here is our next BroDown Showdown for everyone to get behind. So you can see it there. We are going to continue with the themed BroDown Showdown editions. We've been enjoying those, and we hope you have too. So get your comment in the chat now. Who do you think's going to win? We've gone a bit different this week with that primetime comp. So this is based on the Stats Lab primetime BroDown Showdown edition. So we've both picked a defender in Josh Dacos and Dane Zorko. So Haz has Josh Dacos. I've got Dane Zorko. Midfielders, we're flipping that coin. We're going to see who comes out on top for the Dockers. He's gone Sarong. I've gone Andy Bray. We've then opted to go against the Rucks, and we're just going to have a utility spot, and we're going to have Dacos versus Sheasel. And then in the forward line, we've got Rochelle for Haz against Zach Bailey for me. So get in the chat now, and who do you think is going to come out this week in our Stats Lab primetime edition of the BroDown Showdown? Is it going to be Haz with Dacos, Sarong, Dacos number 2, and Rochelle, or is it going to be Zorko, Brayshaw, Sheasel, and Bailey for me? Get in there now. There's a few comments coming in. TCB, he's going to back in Haz. Well done, TCB. And then a few other comments as well. Janeth getting behind me. Thanks, Janeth. Appreciate that. And Haz getting in there as well. Well done, Haz. So we'll chuck you on the wheel next week.
Yeah, if we can get on the wheel, why not give it a go?
Hey, I've figured out a little loophole. No one said.
The reason I'm voting for you is because I'm obviously a Brisbane Lions supporter, and I am a little bit concerned that I've got both Dacos boys there, and if they go well, that means Brisbane Lions lose the game. So I'm actually hoping you do win this week, because I think I'd rather have a Lions win and take that instead of a BroDown Showdown win. But obviously, I'll take it if it comes. And obviously, we can see that comment on the board. Tiebreaker, if it's 2-2, is highest points. Yes, that is correct. So the highest scoring player for the round will determine who would come away with the win in a tiebreak situation.
Yeah, pretty good way to do it, I reckon. Makes it really exciting. So, mate, let's round out that episode then, hey, because it's been a big one if you want to lead it.
Yeah, so new users, make sure you use the code FBAR26 in all caps when signing up to GameDay Squad to get yourself 3 9-player common packs. Thanks, Pitty, for having me on this week. I don't know when I'll be back, but I'll try and be back as soon as possible. And thanks for letting me pick your brain, because apparently you're the superior fantasy bro. But I don't know. We'll have to wait and see based on the results from this week. So thanks for having me again, mate. And obviously loving your work, keeping up everyone up to date while I've, with my footy training and can't make it. So killing it, mate. Keep up the good work.
Thanks, mate. I appreciate it. I've loved having you back on. I have really missed, having you on talking footy each week. It's been, it's the highlight of my week. So thanks so much for coming on again. And yeah, can't wait to have you again throughout the season when you can make it as well. I don't like players getting injured, but if it means you can come on, then I can't say that. I take that back. That's actually horrible. Let's just move on. Good luck for the cup this week. And next week, we've got our round 5 live preview. So that's Wednesday, 8th of April. And I've got to get my dates right. I feel like that one is going to be Roscoe from Third Man Up. Does some work with Janeth on Supercoach Swordplay podcast. So can't wait to get his insights. He is killing it at the moment in lots of those competitions. So thanks, everyone, for tuning in. It's been a fun one. It's been a big one. And let's keep an eye on those teams before lockout. Have a good night.
Bring it on, Tom.